Question 1. Quality control measures reveal that a financial institution in the United States is implementing a new data loss prevention (DLP) solution. The chosen solution offers advanced threat detection, but has limited native logging capabilities, requiring significant manual configuration to capture audit trails that meet stringent regulatory requirements. The IT security team is considering two primary implementation strategies: one that prioritizes rapid deployment and leverages the solution's core threat detection features, with a plan to address detailed auditing requirements in a later phase, and another that involves a more time-consuming initial setup to ensure comprehensive logging and audit trail generation from the outset, aligning with U.S. financial regulatory expectations. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for implementing security technologies in the U.S. financial sector? Option A. Prioritize comprehensive logging and audit trail generation from the outset to ensure immediate compliance with U.S. financial regulations. Option B. Implement the solution with minimal logging, relying on vendor assurances of future compliance updates to meet regulatory needs. Option C. Configure logging to capture only high-severity events, assuming this is sufficient for most regulatory audits in the U.S. financial sector. Option D. Focus on rapid deployment of the core threat detection features, deferring detailed audit trail configuration to a later, less critical phase. The correct answer is A. Prioritize comprehensive logging and audit trail generation from the outset to ensure immediate compliance with U.S. financial regulations. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a regulated industry. Specifically, the question probes the understanding of how regulatory frameworks, such as those governing financial services in the United States, dictate the implementation and auditing of security technologies. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying these regulations to specific technical decisions, ensuring compliance without hindering legitimate business operations. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing adherence to the established regulatory framework. In the U.S. financial sector, regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act (GLBA) and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard (PCI DSS) mandate specific security controls and auditing procedures. Implementing a security solution that aligns with these requirements, including robust logging and regular independent audits, is crucial for demonstrating compliance and protecting sensitive customer data. This proactive and compliant approach mitigates legal and financial risks. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately addresses regulatory requirements poses significant risks. For instance, implementing a security solution without considering the specific logging and auditing mandates of U.S. financial regulations would be a direct violation. This failure to comply could lead to severe penalties, including substantial fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach might involve implementing controls that are overly restrictive, hindering essential business functions without a clear regulatory justification, which can lead to operational inefficiencies and potential noncompliance if business processes are disrupted to the point of violating other operational regulations. A third incorrect approach could be relying solely on vendor claims of compliance without independent verification, which fails to meet the due diligence expected under regulatory oversight. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks. This involves understanding the specific industry and geographic location of the organization. Next, they must thoroughly research the security and auditing requirements within those frameworks. The implementation of any security technology should then be evaluated against these requirements, ensuring that it not only provides adequate security, but also meets all mandated reporting and auditing obligations. Finally, regular independent audits and continuous monitoring are essential to maintain compliance and adapt to evolving threats and regulatory changes. Question 2. The performance metrics show a significant increase in network latency and packet loss across several critical servers. This degradation is impacting user access to sensitive financial data. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to address this situation while adhering to regulatory compliance and security best practices? Option A. Immediately implement a broad network configuration change to reduce traffic, without a full root cause analysis to restore performance. Option B. Continue monitoring the situation, assuming it is a temporary anomaly, and address it only if user complaints escalate significantly. Option C. Immediately isolate the affected servers from the network to prevent further performance issues without assessing the impact on data access or compliance requirements. Option D. Conduct a thorough investigation to determine the root cause of the performance degradation. Assess any potential security implications, and consult relevant security policies and regulatory guidelines before implementing any remediation. Correct answer is A. Immediately implement a broad network configuration change to reduce traffic without a full root cause analysis to restore performance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations where performance metrics indicate a potential security vulnerability. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to address the performance issue with the imperative to maintain regulatory compliance and data integrity. Rushing to implement a fix without proper due diligence can inadvertently violate data privacy regulations or introduce new security risks. Conversely, ignoring performance degradation can impact service availability, which may also have regulatory implications depending on the industry and the nature of the services provided. The professional must navigate these competing demands by adhering to established security protocols and regulatory frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a systematic and compliant response. It involves thoroughly investigating the root cause of the performance degradation while simultaneously assessing its security implications. This includes consulting relevant security policies, incident response plans, and regulatory guidelines, e.g., NIST Cybersecurity Framework, relevant U.S. federal regulations like HIPAA for healthcare data, or SOX for financial data, if applicable to the context of the exam's implied jurisdiction. Documenting all steps taken, from initial detection to resolution, is crucial for auditability and demonstrating due diligence. This approach ensures that any remediation actions are both effective in resolving the performance issue and compliant with legal and ethical obligations, thereby protecting the organization from penalties and reputational damage. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a quick fix without understanding the root cause or security implications is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks exacerbating the problem, introducing new vulnerabilities, or violating data handling regulations if sensitive data is mishandled during the hasty remediation. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and adherence to established security, best practices, and compliance mandates. Ignoring the performance issue entirely until it escalates is also a failure. While it might seem like a way to avoid immediate compliance breaches, it can lead to service disruptions that themselves violate service-level agreements or regulatory requirements for availability. Furthermore, prolonged performance issues can sometimes be indicators of underlying security compromises, which, if left unaddressed, can lead to severe data breaches and noncompliance with data protection laws. Escalating the issue to a different team without providing sufficient context or engaging in collaborative troubleshooting is inefficient and can delay resolution. While collaboration is important, the initial security team has a responsibility to perform a preliminary assessment and document their findings to ensure a coordinated and compliant response. This approach can lead to miscommunication and a fragmented incident response, potentially missing critical security or compliance considerations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response methodology. This involves 1. Detection and analysis. Understand the issue, its scope, and potential impact. 2. Containment, eradication, and recovery. Implement solutions in a controlled manner. 3. Post-incident activity. Document, learn, and improve. Throughout this process, continuous reference to applicable regulatory frameworks and internal security policies is paramount. When performance metrics indicate a potential security concern, the default professional stance is to assume a security-related cause until proven otherwise, and to proceed with caution, prioritizing data protection and compliance. Question 3. Which approach would be most effective in ensuring that the implementation of new network security controls within a U.S.-based financial institution aligns with relevant federal regulatory requirements? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of applicable U.S. federal regulations and consult with legal and compliance departments to map security control requirements before selecting and implementing solutions. Option B. Prioritize the deployment of the latest security technologies recommended by industry analysts to proactively enhance the organization's security posture. Option C. Rely on the vendor's compliance statements and certifications to validate that the chosen security solutions meet all necessary regulatory obligations. Option D. Implement security controls based on the perceived threat landscape and the organization's immediate operational needs, deferring detailed regulatory review until after deployment. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the deployment of the latest security technologies recommended by industry analysts to proactively enhance the organization's security posture. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because implementing security controls without a clear understanding of their regulatory implications can lead to non-compliance, significant fines, and reputational damage. The core of the challenge lies in balancing technical implementation with legal and regulatory adherence, ensuring that security measures not only protect data, but also meet the specific requirements of relevant governing bodies. Careful judgment is required to select security solutions that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape before technical deployment. This proactive stance ensures that security investments are aligned with legal obligations, such as those mandated by U.S. federal regulations governing data privacy and security. By consulting with legal counsel and compliance officers, security professionals can identify specific requirements, understand data handling mandates, and ensure that chosen technologies and configurations meet these standards. This minimizes the risk of non-compliance and demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship, which is ethically and legally imperative. An incorrect approach that involves deploying security solutions based solely on vendor recommendations or perceived best practices without verifying regulatory alignment is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of due diligence regarding specific U.S. regulatory frameworks. Such an approach risks implementing controls that, while technically sound, do not satisfy legal mandates for data protection, breach notification, or access controls, leading to regulatory violations. Another incorrect approach, focusing on implementing the most advanced or expensive security technologies without a clear link to compliance needs, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of the purpose of regulatory compliance, which is not merely about adopting cutting-edge technology, but about meeting specific legal obligations. The failure here is in prioritizing technological sophistication over legal necessity, potentially leading to wasted resources and continued non-compliance if the chosen technologies do not address the specific requirements of U.S. regulations. Finally, an approach that delays or ignores the regulatory review process in favor of rapid deployment is a critical professional failure. This demonstrates a disregard for legal and ethical responsibilities. The professional reasoning process should always involve a structured approach. First, identify all applicable U.S. regulatory frameworks, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare data, SOX for financial reporting, or general data privacy laws like CCPA, if applicable to the organization's scope. Second, engage with legal and compliance teams to interpret these regulations in the context of the organization's operations and the specific security technologies being considered. Third, select and implement security controls that demonstrably meet these interpreted regulatory requirements, documenting the rationale for each choice. This iterative process ensures that technical solutions are grounded in legal and ethical compliance. Question 4. The review process indicates that following a significant data breach, the security team's immediate priority was to restore all affected services to minimize business disruption. However, the incident response plan also mandates adherence to specific data protection regulations. Which of the following approaches best balances operational urgency with regulatory compliance in this scenario? Option A. Contain the breach. Assess the scope and nature of compromised data, document all remediation steps, and initiate the regulatory notification process concurrently with ongoing technical recovery efforts. Option B. Focus solely on technical containment and eradication of the threat, deferring all data privacy and regulatory notification requirements until the business operations are fully normalized. Option C. Immediately restore all affected systems to normal operations, Then conduct a post-incident review to identify any regulatory compliance gaps. Option D. Prioritize the complete eradication of the threat and full system restoration before engaging in any communication or documentation related to regulatory bodies or affected individuals. The correct answer is C. Immediately restore all affected systems to normal operations, then conduct a post-incident review to identify any regulatory compliance gaps. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative of adhering to regulatory compliance frameworks. The pressure to restore services quickly after a data breach can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently violate established data privacy regulations. Professionals must exercise sound judgment to ensure that remediation efforts do not create further legal or ethical liabilities. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between operational urgency and the meticulous requirements of regulatory adherence, particularly concerning data handling and notification. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment and assessment of the breach, while simultaneously initiating the process of documenting all actions and preparing for regulatory notification. This aligns with best practices for incident response and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it reflects the principles of data minimization and accountability mandated by many data protection regulations. By focusing on containing the spread of the breach and understanding its scope, the organization minimizes further exposure. Concurrently, by documenting actions and preparing for notification, it demonstrates a commitment to transparency and timely reporting as required by law. This proactive stance ensures that the organization is not only addressing the technical aspects of the incident, but also fulfilling its legal and ethical obligations to affected parties and regulatory bodies. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately restoring all affected systems without a thorough investigation or proper data sanitization. This fails to address the root cause of the breach and risks reintroducing compromised systems or data, violating the principle of data integrity and potentially leading to further breaches. It also bypasses critical documentation steps necessary for regulatory reporting, demonstrating a lack of accountability. Another incorrect approach is to delay notification to regulatory bodies and affected individuals until the entire incident is resolved and all systems are fully restored. This directly contravenes the strict timelines often stipulated by data privacy laws for breach notification. Such a delay can result in significant fines and reputational damage, as it signals a disregard for the rights of individuals whose data has been compromised and a failure to comply with legal obligations. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on technical remediation without considering the legal and regulatory implications of the data compromised. This narrow focus neglects the broader responsibilities of data protection, such as assessing the sensitivity of the data, identifying affected individuals, and understanding the specific notification requirements based on the type of data and the jurisdictions involved. This oversight can lead to non-compliance with data privacy laws, even if the technical breach is resolved. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response framework that integrates regulatory compliance from the outset. This involves establishing clear roles and responsibilities, developing predefined communication plans for internal stakeholders and external regulatory bodies, and maintaining comprehensive audit trails of all actions taken. When a breach occurs, the immediate steps should be containment and assessment, followed by a parallel process of investigation, documentation, and preparation for notification. This ensures that operational needs are met without compromising legal and ethical obligations. Decision-making should be guided by a risk-based approach, prioritizing actions that mitigate harm to individuals and the organization while adhering to all applicable laws and regulations. Question 5. The analysis reveals that a financial services firm is implementing new Cisco security technologies across its network. To ensure these investments are effectively protecting the organization, a comprehensive risk assessment is required. Which of the following approaches best aligns with industry best practices and regulatory expectations for evaluating the security posture and prioritizing mitigation efforts? Option A. Focus on remediating the highest number of vulnerabilities discovered, regardless of their severity or exploitability. Option B. Conduct a generic risk assessment using a widely available template without tailoring it to the firm's specific business operations or regulatory obligations. Option C. Rank risks primarily by the perceived cost of remediation, allocating resources to the cheapest fixes first. Option D. Prioritize risks based on a detailed analysis of potential business impact and the likelihood of threats, exploiting identified vulnerabilities. Correct answer is D. Prioritize risks based on a detailed analysis of potential business impact and the likelihood of threats exploiting identified vulnerabilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of time and resources. The professionally challenging aspect lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for evaluating potential threats and vulnerabilities within the organization's IT infrastructure, specifically in the context of Cisco security technologies. The chosen approach must align with established risk management frameworks and regulatory expectations, ensuring that security investments are prioritized based on actual risk exposure. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically identifies, analyzes, and prioritizes risks based on their potential impact and likelihood. This aligns with the principles of a robust security program, which is often a requirement or strong recommendation within regulatory frameworks governing data protection and operational resilience. By focusing on the business impact and likelihood of threats, organizations can make informed decisions about resource allocation and mitigation strategies, ensuring that critical assets are adequately protected. This proactive and data-driven methodology is essential for demonstrating due diligence and compliance. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the number of vulnerabilities discovered without considering their exploitability or potential business impact is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to misallocation of resources, focusing on low-impact issues while neglecting more significant threats. It fails to meet the spirit of regulatory requirements that emphasize effective risk management, not just a superficial count of technical flaws. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes risks based on the cost of remediation without a thorough assessment of the actual risk level, is also flawed. This can result in undersourcing the mitigation of high-impact risks if their remediation is perceived as expensive, thereby exposing the organization to unacceptable levels of exposure. Finally, an approach that ignores the organization's specific business context and regulatory obligations when assessing risks is fundamentally unsound. Security controls must be tailored to the unique environment and compliance landscape, and a generic assessment will likely miss critical risks or impose unnecessary burdens. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment methodology. This typically includes defining the scope of the assessment, identifying assets and threats, analyzing vulnerabilities, determining the likelihood and impact of potential risks, evaluating existing controls, and prioritizing risks for treatment. Professionals should always consider the organization's specific business objectives, regulatory environment, and available resources when selecting and applying a risk assessment framework. The goal is to achieve a risk posture that is acceptable to the organization's stakeholders and compliant with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates a critical vulnerability has been identified in a core network service, with a vendor-provided patch available. The organization operates under a strict regulatory framework that mandates documented risk assessments and formal change control procedures for all system modifications. Given the urgency, which of the following actions best aligns with both security best practices and regulatory compliance? Option A. Halt all system changes and initiate a comprehensive, organization-wide risk assessment to evaluate the potential impact of this vulnerability across all services before considering any remediation. Option B. Apply the vendor patch to a limited number of non-critical systems to test its functionality, and if no immediate issues are observed, proceed with a full deployment without a formal risk assessment. Option C. Conduct a rapid, targeted risk assessment for the specific vulnerability and patch, documenting the findings and any residual risks before proceeding with controlled implementation under the change management process. Option D. Immediately deploy the vendor patch to all affected systems to eliminate the critical vulnerability as quickly as possible, deferring any formal risk assessment or change control documentation until after the patch is applied. The correct answer is C. Conduct a rapid, targeted risk assessment for the specific vulnerability and patch, documenting the findings and any residual risks before proceeding with controlled implementation under the change management process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations where a newly identified vulnerability requires immediate attention, but the organization operates under strict compliance mandates that govern system changes. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of patching a critical vulnerability with the need to adhere to established change management and risk assessment processes. Failure to act swiftly could lead to a breach, while bypassing established procedures could result in non-compliance, audit failures, and potential fines. The organization's reliance on a specific regulatory framework, implied by the exam's focus, dictates the acceptable methods for risk mitigation and change implementation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a rapid, targeted risk assessment specifically for the identified vulnerability and the proposed remediation. This assessment must align with the organization's established risk management framework, which is itself guided by the regulatory requirements relevant to the exam's jurisdiction. This process ensures that the potential impact of the vulnerability is understood, the effectiveness of the proposed patch is evaluated, and any residual risks are identified and accepted or mitigated. This approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates due diligence, adherence to established governance, and a structured response to a security threat. It allows for informed decision-making, ensuring that the patch is applied in a controlled manner that minimizes disruption and maintains compliance with the governing regulations. The regulatory framework likely mandates a documented risk assessment process for significant changes, making this approach not only best practice but a compliance necessity. Incorrect approach is analysis. Applying the patch immediately without any form of risk assessment or change control is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established governance processes, which are often mandated by regulations to ensure system stability and security. This approach risks introducing new vulnerabilities or operational issues due to an untested change, leading to potential service disruption and non-compliance with change management policies. Furthermore, it demonstrates a lack of accountability and due diligence. Delaying the patch indefinitely until a full, comprehensive risk assessment of all systems can be completed is also professionally unacceptable. While thoroughness is important, this approach fails to acknowledge the immediate threat posed by a critical vulnerability. Regulations often require timely remediation of known risks. This inaction exposes the organization to a high probability of exploitation, which would be a direct violation of security best practices and potentially specific regulatory obligations to protect data and systems. Implementing the patch based solely on the vendor's recommendation without any internal validation or assessment of its impact on the specific operational environment is another failure. While vendor recommendations are valuable, they do not account for the unique configurations, interdependencies, and specific risk appetite of an organization. This approach can lead to unforeseen consequences and may not adequately address the organization's specific risk posture, potentially violating internal policies and regulatory requirements that demand a tailored risk evaluation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the immediate threat level of the vulnerability. Then, they should consult the organization's established risk management framework and change management policies, which are informed by the relevant regulatory landscape. The decision-making process should prioritize a rapid, yet compliant, risk assessment for the specific vulnerability and proposed remediation. This involves identifying stakeholders, gathering relevant technical information, evaluating potential impacts, and documenting the decision-making process and any residual risks. The goal is to achieve a balance between security imperatives and operational stability, always within the bounds of the governing regulatory framework. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a comprehensive security awareness training program for all employees, coupled with a robust intrusion detection and prevention system, IPS, would significantly reduce the likelihood of a successful phishing attack and subsequent data breach. However, a less expensive but less comprehensive endpoint detection and response (EDR) solution is also being considered as an alternative, which approach best aligns with a proactive and effective risk management strategy for this scenario. Option A. Prioritize the security awareness training program alone as human error is often cited as the primary cause of breaches, and this directly addresses that vulnerability. Option B. Invest in the most advanced threat intelligence platform available, as staying ahead of emerging threats is paramount, even if it means deferring other security controls. Option C. Deploy the less expensive EDR solution, as it provides a baseline level of protection at a lower cost, which is often sufficient for many organizations. Option D. Implement the comprehensive security awareness training program and the robust IPS, as this addresses both the human element and network-level threats, offering a more layered and effective defense against sophisticated attacks. The correct answer is D. Implement the comprehensive security awareness training program and the robust IPS, as this addresses both the human element and network-level threats, offering a more layered and effective defense against sophisticated attacks. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity risk management, balancing the cost of implementing security controls against the potential impact of a security incident. The professional challenge lies in accurately assessing both the likelihood and impact of various threats, and then selecting controls that offer the most effective risk reduction for the investment. This requires a deep understanding of the organization's assets, threat landscape, and business objectives, as well as the capabilities and limitations of different security technologies. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment that considers both technical vulnerabilities and business impact. This aligns with best practices in cybersecurity governance, which emphasize a proactive and data-driven approach to security. By focusing on controls that address the highest risks and provide the greatest return on investment in terms of risk reduction, the organization can optimize its security posture and demonstrate due diligence to stakeholders. This approach is ethically sound as it aims to protect organizational assets and sensitive data, thereby safeguarding customer trust and business continuity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lowest cost of implementation without a thorough risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to a false sense of security, where critical vulnerabilities remain unaddressed, exposing the organization to significant financial and reputational damage. Such an approach fails to meet the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and could be seen as negligent if an incident occurs. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the most advanced or cutting-edge technologies without a clear understanding of their applicability to the organization's specific risks is also flawed. This can result in wasted resources on solutions that do not effectively mitigate the most pressing threats or that are overly complex to manage, potentially introducing new vulnerabilities. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a failure to align security investments with business needs. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the recommendations of vendors without independent validation of their effectiveness against the organization's specific threat profile is professionally unsound. This can lead to the adoption of ineffective controls or the overlooking of more critical risks. Professional decision-making in risk assessment requires a structured process that includes threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, impact assessment, and the evaluation of control effectiveness, all within the context of the organization's risk appetite and business objectives. Question 8. During the evaluation of an organization's security posture for an upcoming audit, which approach to risk assessment would best balance the need for comprehensive data with operational continuity and provide the most actionable insights into potential threats and vulnerabilities? Option A. A phased methodology starting with asset inventory and threat modeling, progressing to vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, and concluding with a review of security policies and incident response plans. Option B. Solely conducting extensive penetration testing across all network segments without prior asset identification or threat landscape analysis. Option C. Performing only automated vulnerability scans across the entire infrastructure without any form of penetration testing or policy review. Option D. Focusing exclusively on reviewing existing security policies and documentation, assuming they accurately reflect the current security controls and threat environment. Correct answer is A. A phased methodology starting with asset inventory and threat modeling, progressing to vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, and concluding with a review of security policies and incident response plans. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity risk assessment, balancing the need for comprehensive data gathering with the practical constraints of time, resources, and potential impact on ongoing operations. The organization is undergoing a critical security audit, and the risk assessment team needs to understand the current threat landscape and the effectiveness of existing controls. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate methodology to achieve this understanding without causing undue disruption or missing crucial insights. Professional judgment is required to prioritize actions and select tools that align with the audit's objectives and the organization's risk tolerance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased methodology that begins with a broad understanding of the asset inventory and threat landscape, followed by a more focused analysis of critical assets and vulnerabilities. This aligns with best practices in risk assessment, such as those outlined in NIST SB 800-30, which emphasizes a systematic process. Starting with asset identification and threat modeling provides context. Subsequently, vulnerability scanning and penetration testing offer a practical, albeit intrusive, view of exploitable weaknesses. Finally, reviewing existing security policies and incident response plans assesses the organizational and procedural controls. This layered approach ensures that both technical and non-technical risks are considered, and that the assessment progresses logically from general to specific, maximizing the value of each step while managing potential disruption. This methodical progression is crucial for a thorough and defensible risk assessment, supporting compliance with general security best practices and potentially specific regulatory requirements for due diligence and security posture. Incorrect approaches analysis, focusing solely on penetration testing without prior asset identification and threat modeling, is professionally unsound. Penetration testing, while valuable, is an intrusive activity. Without understanding what assets are critical or what threats are most relevant, penetration testers might focus on low-impact systems or miss critical vulnerabilities on high-value targets. This approach risks wasting resources and failing to provide a holistic view of the organization's risk posture, potentially leading to non-compliance with due diligence expectations. Conducting only vulnerability scans without subsequent penetration testing or policy review is also incomplete. Vulnerability scans identify known weaknesses but do not confirm exploitability or assess the impact of those vulnerabilities in the context of the organization's specific environment. This leaves a gap in understanding the actual risk, as a vulnerability might exist but be mitigated by other controls, or simply not be exploitable. This superficial assessment could lead to a false sense of security and non-compliance with requirements for a robust risk assessment. Prioritizing the review of outdated security policies over active testing and threat analysis is a significant professional failure. While policies are important, they represent intended security measures, not necessarily implemented or effective ones. Relying solely on policy review ignores the dynamic nature of threats and the reality of technical controls. This approach fails to identify actual risks and vulnerabilities, making the assessment irrelevant to the current security landscape and a clear deviation from professional standards of due diligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment with a structured, iterative methodology. The process should begin with defining the scope and objectives, followed by asset identification, threat modeling, vulnerability assessment, and impact analysis. The choice of specific tools and techniques should be driven by the scope, available resources, and the criticality of the assets being assessed. A phased approach, moving from broad understanding to specific testing, allows for efficient resource allocation and ensures that the assessment addresses the most significant risks. Continuous communication with stakeholders is also vital to manage expectations and ensure the assessment's findings are actionable. Question 9. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a newly developed critical business application's risk assessment should be expedited by downplaying the likelihood of certain sophisticated cyber threats to align with project timelines. As a security professional responsible for the risk assessment, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Prioritize the technical implementation of security features within the application without conducting a formal risk assessment, assuming that robust technical measures will inherently mitigate all potential risks. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that quantifies potential impacts and likelihoods based on threat intelligence and vulnerability analysis, and present the findings objectively to stakeholders, recommending controls commensurate with the identified risk levels. Option C. Accept the stakeholders' assessment of reduced threat likelihood to facilitate the project's rapid deployment, focusing only on implementing basic, universally applicable security controls. Option D. Focus the risk assessment solely on the technical vulnerabilities of the application, disregarding the potential business impact and the likelihood of specific threat actors targeting the organization. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that quantifies potential impacts and likelihoods based on threat intelligence and vulnerability analysis, and present the findings objectively to stakeholders, recommending controls commensurate with the identified risk levels. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, where a critical business function's risk assessment is being influenced by external pressures rather than objective analysis. The pressure to downplay risks to expedite a project creates a conflict between business objectives and security best practices. Professionals must navigate this by adhering to established risk management methodologies and regulatory compliance, even when it means pushing back against stakeholders. The challenge lies in maintaining the integrity of the risk assessment process while fostering collaboration and understanding with business units. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, data-driven risk assessment that quantifies potential impacts and likelihoods, aligning with the principles of a robust risk management framework. This methodology ensures that decisions are based on objective evidence, not subjective opinions or external pressures. In the context of Cisco's security technologies and common regulatory frameworks, assuming a U.S. jurisdiction for this exam, as is typical for Cisco certifications unless otherwise specified. This aligns with requirements for due diligence, reasonable security measures, and compliance with standards like NIST. A thorough assessment provides a defensible basis for security investments and controls, protecting the organization from potential breaches and their associated liabilities. It also facilitates informed decision-making by providing clear visibility into the organization's risk posture. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to accept the stakeholder's assertion without independent verification. This bypasses the fundamental principles of risk assessment, which require objective analysis and evidence. Ethically and regulatorily, this failure constitutes negligence. It means the organization is operating under a false sense of security, potentially violating its duty of care to protect sensitive data and systems. This could lead to noncompliance with regulations such as HIPAA, PCI DSS, or SOX, depending on the industry, resulting in significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the technical feasibility of implementing security controls without considering the business impact or the likelihood of threats. While technical implementation is important, risk assessment is about understanding the potential harm to the business. Ignoring the business context leads to misallocation of resources and ineffective security strategies. This approach fails to meet the regulatory requirement of conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that considers all relevant factors, including business operations and potential financial or reputational losses. A third incorrect approach is to implement a generic set of security controls without tailoring them to the specific risks identified for the critical business function. This one-size-fits-all mentality is inefficient and often ineffective. It fails to address the unique threat landscape and vulnerabilities associated with the function, leaving it exposed. From a regulatory standpoint, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to implement controls that are reasonable and appropriate for the identified risks, which is a common requirement across many security frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first understanding the business context and objectives of the system or function under review. They should then follow a defined risk management methodology, such as that outlined in NIST SB 800-30, which involves identifying assets, threats, vulnerabilities, and existing controls. This is followed by determining the likelihood and impact of potential risks, leading to a risk level. Based on this analysis, appropriate mitigation strategies are developed and prioritized. When faced with stakeholder pressure, the professional's duty is to present the objective findings of the risk assessment, clearly articulating the potential consequences of underestimating risks. This involves educating stakeholders on the importance of a thorough assessment and its role in protecting the organization. The decision-making process should be guided by a commitment to accuracy, objectivity, and compliance with relevant regulations and organizational policies. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern regarding the security of a recently deployed customer-facing web application. While specific incidents haven't been reported, the feedback suggests a general unease about potential data breaches. What is the most appropriate next step to address this concern? Option A. Initiate a formal risk assessment process for the web application, focusing on identifying potential threats, vulnerabilities, and their impact on business operations and data confidentiality. Option B. Rely on general industry threat intelligence reports to identify common vulnerabilities in web applications and apply patches and configurations accordingly without a specific assessment of the application's unique environment. Option C. Conduct a series of interviews with the stakeholders who expressed concerns to gather more anecdotal evidence and subjective opinions about potential security weaknesses. Option D. Immediately implement a broad set of advanced security controls, such as intrusion prevention systems and advanced endpoint detection, across the entire network based on the general unease. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal risk assessment process for the web application, focusing on identifying potential threats, vulnerabilities, and their impact on business operations and data confidentiality. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity where a critical business function's security posture is being evaluated. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of time and resources, while ensuring that the assessment accurately reflects the actual threat landscape and the organization's risk appetite. The stakeholder feedback, while valuable, introduces a subjective element that needs to be objectively validated. The core difficulty is moving from anecdotal concerns to a structured, data-driven security evaluation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal risk assessment process that is aligned with established cybersecurity frameworks and the organization's specific context. This process typically includes asset identification, threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, and impact assessment. By systematically evaluating potential threats and vulnerabilities against critical business functions, an organization can prioritize remediation efforts based on the likelihood and impact of identified risks. This aligns with the principles of responsible information security management, which mandates a proactive and structured approach to identifying and mitigating risks. In the context of U.S. regulations, such as those influenced by NIST frameworks, e.g., NIST SB 800-30, a formal risk assessment is a foundational requirement for establishing an effective security program. It ensures that security investments are targeted and that the organization can demonstrate due diligence in protecting its assets and data. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on the stakeholders' anecdotal concerns without a structured assessment is professionally unacceptable because it leads to reactive, potentially misdirected security efforts. This approach fails to provide an objective understanding of the actual risk landscape, potentially overlooking more significant threats or vulnerabilities. It also lacks the rigor required to justify security investments or to demonstrate compliance with regulatory expectations for risk management. Implementing security controls based on a generalized threat intelligence feed without correlating it to the organization's specific assets and business processes is also professionally flawed. While threat intelligence is valuable, its application must be contextualized. Without this, resources may be spent on mitigating threats that are not relevant to the organization, or critical, organization-specific threats might be missed. This approach bypasses the essential step of understanding the organization's unique risk profile. Prioritizing security improvements based on the perceived loudest stakeholder concern, without a formal risk assessment, is a recipe for inefficient resource allocation and potentially ineffective security. This approach is driven by influence rather than objective risk, which can lead to significant security gaps in areas that are less visible but potentially more critical. It fails to establish a defensible basis for security decisions and can undermine the credibility of the security team. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first acknowledging the stakeholder feedback as a trigger for investigation, not as a definitive finding. The decision-making process should then follow a structured risk management methodology. This involves 1. Defining the scope of the assessment based on the feedback and the critical business functions involved. 2. Identifying relevant assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. 3. Analyzing the likelihood and impact of identified risks. 4. Evaluating existing controls and their effectiveness. 5. Recommending prioritized mitigation strategies aligned with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory requirements. This systematic approach ensures that security decisions are data-driven, defensible, and aligned with business objectives and compliance obligations. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates that a financial services firm is undergoing a comprehensive risk assessment for its cloud-based infrastructure. The firm has access to numerous global threat intelligence feeds, but limited resources for real-time analysis. Which approach best aligns with regulatory expectations for effective risk management and operational efficiency in this context? Option A. Develop a process to subscribe to and integrate curated threat intelligence feeds that are specifically tailored to the financial services industry and the firm's identified threat profile, and then use this intelligence to inform a structured risk assessment methodology. Option B. Implement a system that ingests and analyzes all available threat intelligence data from every global source to ensure no potential threat is missed. Option C. Bypass formal risk assessment procedures and focus solely on responding to individual security alerts as they arise, without a broader threat intelligence strategy. Option D. Rely exclusively on open-source threat intelligence that is freely available to all organizations, without any specific filtering or industry focus. The correct answer is B. Implement a system that ingests and analyzes all available threat intelligence data from every global source to ensure no potential threat is missed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity risk assessment, balancing the need for comprehensive threat intelligence with the practical limitations of data volume and processing capabilities. Organizations must identify and prioritize risks effectively to allocate resources appropriately. The challenge lies in determining the most efficient and compliant method for gathering and analyzing this intelligence without overwhelming security teams or violating data handling regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging threat intelligence feeds that are curated and prioritized based on the organization's specific industry, threat landscape, and regulatory obligations. This method ensures that the risk assessment focuses on the most relevant and actionable information. By integrating this intelligence into a structured risk management framework, such as NIST SB 800-30, organizations can systematically identify, analyze, and evaluate risks. This aligns with regulatory expectations for due diligence in security posture management and demonstrates a proactive approach to cybersecurity. The focus on relevance and actionability directly supports the principle of effective risk mitigation. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to ingest all available threat intelligence data from every conceivable source without any filtering or prioritization. This leads to information overload, making it impossible to discern critical threats from noise. It is inefficient, costly to process, and can result in missed critical vulnerabilities due to the sheer volume of data. This approach fails to demonstrate a reasoned and proportionate response to risk, potentially violating principles of prudent security investment and operational effectiveness. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on generic, widely available threat intelligence that does not account for the organization's unique operational context or industry-specific threats. This can lead to a misallocation of resources, focusing on threats that are unlikely to impact the organization while neglecting more pertinent risks. It demonstrates a lack of tailored due diligence and can result in non-compliance with regulations that require a risk assessment to be specific to the entity being protected. A third incorrect approach is to bypass formal risk assessment processes and solely react to individual security alerts without a broader understanding of the threat landscape. This reactive stance is inherently inefficient and does not provide a strategic view of the organization's risk posture. It fails to identify systemic vulnerabilities or emerging threats that might not trigger immediate alerts, but pose significant long-term risks. This approach is not aligned with established risk management, best practices, and regulatory guidance that mandates a structured and proactive risk assessment process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first understanding the organization's critical assets, business objectives, and regulatory environment. This foundational understanding guides the selection of appropriate threat intelligence sources and the definition of risk criteria. A structured methodology, such as that outlined in NIST SB 800-30, should be employed to ensure a consistent and repeatable process. The process should involve identifying threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood, and impact, and then evaluating the risks against defined tolerance levels. Continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment are crucial to adapt to the evolving threat landscape and organizational changes. This systematic and context-aware approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant risks, thereby meeting both operational and regulatory requirements. Question 12. Compliance review shows that a significant number of alerts are being generated by the Intrusion Detection System, IDs, related to unusual outbound traffic patterns from a critical server. The Security Operations Center, SOC team is overwhelmed by the volume of these alerts, and there is concern that legitimate business processes might be impacted if the server's traffic is blocked indiscriminately. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to professional security best practices and implied regulatory expectations for operational integrity? Option A. Increase the alert threshold on the IDS for this server to filter out less severe alerts, assuming that the most critical threats will still be flagged. Option B. Immediately configure the IDS to block all outbound traffic from the critical server that matches the alert signature to prevent potential data exfiltration. Option C. Implement a tiered response strategy. First, enhance logging and alerting for the affected server to gather more context, then analyze the traffic patterns against known threat intelligence. And finally, if a credible threat is confirmed, implement targeted blocking or containment measures. Option D. Temporarily disable the IDS alerts for this specific server to reduce the alert volume and allow the SOC team to focus on other critical incidents. The correct answer is B. Immediately configure the IDS to block all outbound traffic from the critical server that matches the alert signature to prevent potential data exfiltration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security operations, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of legitimate business processes. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and mitigating threats without inadvertently disrupting critical services. The pressure to maintain uptime and the potential for false positives necessitate a nuanced approach that goes beyond simple rule-based blocking. Professionals must possess a deep understanding of both security technologies and the business context in which they operate. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes threat intelligence, contextual analysis, and phased remediation. This aligns with best practices for incident response and security operations, emphasizing a data-driven and risk-aware methodology. By leveraging threat intelligence feeds, security teams can proactively identify known malicious indicators. Correlating these indicators with network traffic patterns and user behavior provides crucial context, helping to distinguish between genuine threats and benign anomalies. Implementing a phased remediation strategy, starting with less disruptive measures like logging and alerting, allows for verification and minimizes the risk of operational impact. This approach is professionally sound as it demonstrates due diligence, a commitment to minimizing business disruption, and an adherence to principles of effective risk management, which are implicitly expected in the implementation and operation of security technologies. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing an overly broad blocking policy based solely on a single indicator without further investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to apply a risk-based methodology. It can lead to the disruption of critical business operations, potentially violating service-level agreements and causing financial or reputational damage. Ethically, it represents a failure to act with reasonable care and skill. Disabling security monitoring tools to reduce alert volume without addressing the root cause of the alerts is another critical failure. This action directly undermines the purpose of security controls and creates significant blind spots. It is a dereliction of duty that leaves the organization vulnerable to undetected attacks. This approach is ethically unsound as it prioritizes convenience over security and fails to uphold the professional responsibility to protect organizational assets. Relying solely on automated threat detection without human oversight or a defined escalation process is also problematic. While automation is crucial, it is not infallible. False positives can lead to unnecessary disruptions, and sophisticated threats may evade purely automated systems. This approach lacks the necessary human judgment and contextual understanding required for effective security operations, potentially leading to missed threats or unwarranted actions. It fails to meet the professional standard of ensuring comprehensive and reliable security. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response framework. This involves continuous monitoring, threat detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. The decision-making process should be guided by a risk assessment that considers the potential impact of both the threat and the response. Prioritize gathering comprehensive data, correlating information from multiple sources, and validating findings before taking decisive action. Always consider the business impact of any security measure. Regular training and adherence to organizational security policies and procedures are paramount. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a recent network intrusion has been contained, and there is significant pressure from business units to restore full operational capabilities immediately to minimize revenue loss. The Security Operations Center has provided a preliminary assessment, but a full root cause analysis and comprehensive remediation plan are not yet complete. What is the most professional and secure approach to address this situation? Option A. Escalate the situation to senior management, highlighting the risks of immediate full restoration without complete security validation, and propose a temporary limited restoration of essential services while the investigation continues. Option B. Implement a phased restoration of services, prioritizing critical business functions, while concurrently completing the full incident investigation and developing a robust remediation plan. Enhanced monitoring will be applied to restored systems. Option C. Immediately restore all services as requested by stakeholders to prevent further business impact, assuming the initial containment measures were sufficient. Option D. Proceed with full service restoration based on the preliminary assessment and schedule a security review for the following quarter to address any potential lingering issues. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased restoration of services, prioritizing critical business functions, while concurrently completing the full incident investigation and developing a robust remediation plan. Enhanced monitoring will be applied to restored systems. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the immediate need for system availability with the imperative to maintain robust security. Stakeholders, often focused on business continuity and revenue generation, may prioritize rapid restoration of services over thorough security validation. This creates a professional tension for the security engineer, who must advocate for security best practices while acknowledging operational pressures. The challenge lies in communicating the risks associated with bypassing security controls and finding solutions that satisfy both security and operational requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured incident response process that includes a post-incident review and remediation plan. This aligns with industry best practices and regulatory expectations for incident management, such as those outlined in NIST SB 800-61 Revision 2, Computer Security Incident Handling Guide. This framework emphasizes not just containment and eradication, but also lessons learned and continuous improvement. By documenting the incident, analyzing the root cause, and implementing corrective actions, the organization strengthens its security posture against future attacks. This proactive stance is ethically sound, as it prioritizes the long-term security and integrity of the organization's data and systems, fulfilling the duty of care to protect sensitive information. Incorrect approaches analysis. Bypassing security controls without proper authorization or documentation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Creates a blind spot in the security posture, making the organization vulnerable to reinfection or further exploitation. This directly contravenes principles of due diligence and responsible security management. From a regulatory perspective, failing to adequately investigate and remediate security incidents can lead to noncompliance with data protection laws, e.g., if personal data was compromised, and potential fines or legal repercussions. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for the potential harm to the organization and its customers. Failing to involve the security team in the decision-making process for restoring services after a security incident is another critical failure. Security is a shared responsibility, and excluding the experts undermines the effectiveness of the incident response. This can lead to decisions that inadvertently reintroduce vulnerabilities or fail to address the root cause of the incident. It also creates an environment where security is seen as an afterthought rather than an integral part of business operations, which is a failure in fostering a security-aware culture. Accepting a stakeholder's assertion that the threat is contained without independent verification by the security team is professionally negligent. This relies on assumptions rather than evidence, which is contrary to the scientific and systematic approach required in cybersecurity. It can lead to a false sense of security and leave critical systems exposed. This approach fails to uphold the professional standard of rigorous investigation and validation, potentially exposing the organization to significant risks that could have been mitigated with proper due diligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by adhering to established incident response frameworks. This involves clear communication channels between IT operations, security teams, and business stakeholders. When an incident occurs, the priority is to contain and eradicate the threat, followed by thorough analysis and remediation. Decisions regarding system restoration should be made collaboratively, with security considerations being paramount. If immediate restoration is critical, it should be done under controlled conditions with enhanced monitoring and a commitment to a full security review and remediation post-restoration. Documenting all actions, decisions, and justifications is crucial for accountability and future learning. Professionals must be prepared to articulate the risks associated with security shortcuts and advocate for best practices, even under pressure. Question 14. Implementation of a security alert response protocol that prioritizes immediate, broad-based network segmentation upon receiving a high-severity intrusion detection system alert, without initial verification of the alert's validity or consultation with affected application owners, is being evaluated. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound and compliant approach to handling such an alert? Option A. Initiate a detailed log analysis and traffic pattern investigation. Engage with application owners to understand potential impacts, and then implement targeted containment measures based on confirmed findings. Option B. Immediately implement a network-wide firewall rule to block all traffic to and from the suspected source IP address until the alert can be fully investigated. Option C. Apply a temporary, less restrictive firewall rule to monitor traffic from the suspected source without blocking it, pending further analysis. Option D. Disable the affected application service temporarily to prevent any potential data exfiltration while the security team investigates the alert. The correct answer is A. Initiate a detailed log analysis and traffic pattern investigation. Engage with application owners to understand potential impacts, and then implement targeted containment measures based on confirmed findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security operations, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of business applications. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating threats without causing undue disruption to critical services. A misstep can lead to security vulnerabilities or significant downtime, both of which have severe financial and reputational consequences. The pressure to quickly resolve a perceived threat, coupled with incomplete information, can lead to hasty decisions that may not align with best practices or regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based investigation. This aligns with best professional practices for incident response and security operations, emphasizing a thorough understanding of the situation before implementing countermeasures. In the context of U.S. regulation, such as those mandated by NIST guidelines, which inform many U.S. cybersecurity frameworks, a structured incident response process is crucial. This process typically includes identification, containment, eradication, and recovery. By gathering logs, analyzing traffic patterns, and consulting with application owners, the security team ensures that any action taken is proportionate to the threat and minimizes the risk of unintended consequences. This methodical approach also supports auditability and compliance, as it provides a clear record of the investigation and the rationale behind the implemented solutions. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to maintaining both security and operational integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a broad, network-wide block based solely on an alert without further investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses the established incident response framework, which is often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies like the SEC for publicly traded companies or HIPAA for healthcare data. Such an action could be deemed negligent if it leads to a breach or if it disrupts services without a valid justification, potentially violating service-level agreements or even data protection regulations by preventing legitimate access to data. Applying a temporary, less restrictive firewall rule without understanding the root cause is also problematic. While seemingly less disruptive, it fails to address the actual threat, leaving the network vulnerable. This can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence, potentially violating compliance requirements that mandate effective threat mitigation. It also represents poor professional judgment by not fully resolving the issue. Disabling the application entirely without consulting stakeholders or performing a risk assessment is a severe operational and potentially regulatory failure. This action could violate data privacy laws if it prevents access to necessary information or if it causes data loss. It also demonstrates a lack of collaboration and understanding of business impact, which is a hallmark of unprofessional conduct in a security role. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response methodology. This involves 1. Verifying the alert and gathering all relevant data, logs, traffic captures, system states. 2. Analyzing the data to determine the nature, scope, and impact of the potential threat. 3. Consulting with relevant stakeholders, application owners, system administrators, management. 4. Developing and implementing a containment and eradication strategy that is proportionate to the threat and minimizes operational impact. 5. Documenting all actions and decisions for audit and future reference. This systematic approach ensures that security measures are effective, compliant, and aligned with business objectives. Question 15. The risk matrix shows a critical vulnerability in the customer data management system that, if exploited, could lead to a significant data breach. The system is essential for daily operations, and immediate patching is technically feasible but may cause temporary service disruptions. What is the most professional and compliant approach to address this critical finding? Option A. Defer patching until the next scheduled maintenance window to avoid any potential disruption to daily operations. Option B. Implement immediate patching of the vulnerability, coupled with enhanced monitoring and a communication plan to inform users of potential brief service interruptions. Option C. Implement a complex, multi-layered security solution that addresses the vulnerability indirectly, without directly patching the system, to avoid any operational impact. Option D. Document the risk as acceptable due to the potential for service disruption and focus resources on lower priority security findings. Correct answer is B. Implement immediate patching of the vulnerability, coupled with enhanced monitoring and a communication plan to inform users of potential brief service interruptions. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a business. The risk matrix, a standard tool for prioritizing security efforts, highlights a critical vulnerability that, if exploited, could lead to significant data breaches and operational disruption. The professional challenge lies in selecting the most effective and compliant remediation strategy that aligns with the organization's security posture and regulatory obligations, without introducing new risks or violating established policies. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of security controls, starting with immediate mitigation of the most severe risks and progressing to more comprehensive solutions. This aligns with best practices in incident response and risk management, emphasizing a proactive and layered security strategy. Specifically, it prioritizes patching known vulnerabilities, implementing stricter access controls, and enhancing monitoring capabilities. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the identified risks, adheres to the principle of least privilege, and supports the organization's duty to protect sensitive data, which is a fundamental ethical and often regulatory requirement. By focusing on immediate containment and then building a more resilient security architecture, it demonstrates a commitment to continuous security improvement and compliance with relevant data protection regulations. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the high-risk finding due to perceived operational inconvenience. This failure to act on a clearly identified critical risk is a direct violation of professional responsibility and could lead to severe regulatory penalties if a breach occurs. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the organization's security obligations. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a solution that is overly complex or disruptive without a thorough impact assessment. This could lead to unintended operational consequences, user frustration, and potentially introduce new security gaps if not managed properly. Such an approach lacks strategic planning and a holistic understanding of the security ecosystem. Finally, relying solely on a single, expensive security technology without addressing underlying process or human factors would be an incomplete and potentially ineffective solution, failing to provide a comprehensive defense and potentially wasting resources. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the implications of the risk matrix findings. This involves assessing the likelihood and impact of the identified vulnerabilities. Next, they should evaluate potential remediation strategies, considering their effectiveness, cost, operational impact, and alignment with existing security policies and regulatory requirements. A phased approach, prioritizing immediate mitigation and then planning for long-term improvements, is generally the most prudent. Collaboration with IT operations and business stakeholders is crucial to ensure that security measures are effective without unduly hindering business functions. Continuous monitoring and periodic reevaluation of the risk matrix are essential to adapt to evolving threats and organizational changes. Question 16. The control framework reveals a proposal to implement a new intrusion prevention system, IPS, based on a recent industry white paper highlighting its advanced threat detection capabilities. The proposed IPS is from a reputable vendor, and the white paper suggests it is a leading solution for mitigating zero-day exploits. The security team is under pressure to deploy this solution rapidly to address perceived emerging threats. Which approach best aligns with professional best practices and the regulatory framework for implementing this new security control? Option A. Immediately deploy the IPS across the entire network as recommended by the vendor's white paper, assuming its advanced capabilities will automatically enhance the organization's security posture. Option B. Implement the IPS in a limited, non-critical segment of the network to observe its behavior, without a formal evaluation process or consideration of broader operational impacts. Option C. Conduct a thorough proof of concept, POC, and pilot deployment to assess the IPS's effectiveness, performance impact, and compatibility with existing infrastructure, while also verifying its compliance with relevant security standards and organizational policies. Option D. Rely solely on the vendor's white paper and marketing materials to justify the deployment, prioritizing speed of implementation over any independent technical validation or risk assessment. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough proof of concept (POC) and pilot deployment to assess the IPS's effectiveness, performance impact, and compatibility with existing infrastructure, while also verifying its compliance with relevant security standards and organizational policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security operations, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a dynamic business environment. The challenge lies in the potential for security policies to impede legitimate business functions, leading to friction between IT security and other departments. A security professional must navigate this tension by understanding both the technical implications of security measures and their business impact, ensuring that security decisions are risk-informed and aligned with organizational objectives. The pressure to quickly implement a solution without thorough vetting adds complexity, as it increases the risk of unintended consequences or non-compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the proposed security control against established best practices and relevant regulatory requirements. This includes understanding the specific threat landscape the control aims to mitigate, its potential impact on network performance and user experience, and its alignment with the organization's overall security strategy and risk appetite. Crucially, it involves consulting and adhering to the guidelines and frameworks mandated by the 350-701 Implementing and Operating Cisco Security Core Technologies exams jurisdiction. This ensures that the implementation is not only technically sound, but also compliant with applicable laws and industry standards, thereby minimizing legal and reputational risks. A thorough risk assessment and a phased rollout, if appropriate, are hallmarks of professional security practice, demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to effective, sustainable security. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a security control solely based on a vendor's recommendation without independent validation is a significant ethical and professional failure. It bypasses the critical step of assessing the control's suitability for the specific organizational context and its potential for unintended side effects. This approach risks deploying ineffective or even detrimental security measures, failing to meet the organization's actual security needs, and potentially creating new vulnerabilities. It also disregards the responsibility to ensure compliance with the specific regulatory framework governing the exam's jurisdiction, which may have explicit requirements for due diligence in security control selection and implementation. Deploying a security control without considering its impact on existing business processes or user workflows is another critical failure. This demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding of the organization's operational environment and can lead to significant disruption, decreased productivity, and user resistance. From a regulatory perspective, such a deployment might inadvertently violate service-level agreements or operational continuity requirements, leading to non-compliance. It prioritizes a narrow technical view over the broader organizational impact, which is unprofessional and counterproductive. Adopting a security control based on its perceived popularity or trendiness, without a clear understanding of its technical merits or relevance to the organization's specific threats, is a superficial and risky approach. This security by association mentality can lead to the adoption of solutions that are not fit for purpose, consuming resources without delivering commensurate security benefits. It also fails to demonstrate the professional rigor required to select controls based on objective criteria and alignment with established security principles and regulatory mandates. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach security control implementation with a structured, risk-based methodology. This involves 1. Understanding the threat and vulnerability landscape relevant to the organization. 2. Identifying potential security controls that address these risks. 3. Evaluating each control based on its effectiveness, operational impact, cost, and alignment with organizational policies and regulatory requirements. 4. Conducting thorough testing and validation before full deployment. 5. Establishing clear metrics for ongoing monitoring and performance assessment. This systematic process ensures that security investments are strategic, effective, and compliant, fostering trust and demonstrating professional accountability. Question 17. Governance review demonstrates that a newly deployed network security appliance, intended to enhance threat detection capabilities, is causing significant performance degradation for critical business applications. The security team is under pressure to resolve the application issues, while the compliance team insists on maintaining the security posture. What is the most professional and effective approach to address this situation? Option A. Disable specific, non-critical security features within the appliance that are suspected of causing the performance issues, while leaving the core security functionalities active. Option B. Immediately revert the security appliance to its pre-deployment state to restore application performance, and schedule a separate, less urgent review of the security appliance's configuration at a later date. Option C. Conduct a detailed analysis of the security appliance's logs and network traffic patterns to identify specific configuration elements or traffic flows contributing to the performance bottleneck, and then implement targeted adjustments to optimize performance without compromising security. Option D. Apply a broad network-wide policy change to reduce the security appliance's inspection depth across all traffic segments to alleviate performance pressure. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed analysis of the security appliance's logs and network traffic patterns to identify specific configuration elements or traffic flows contributing to the performance bottleneck, and then implement targeted adjustments to optimize performance without compromising security. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security operations where a newly implemented security control, while technically functional, has unintended consequences on critical business processes. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for enhanced security with the operational continuity and performance requirements of the organization. A hasty rollback without proper analysis risks reintroducing vulnerabilities, while maintaining a flawed configuration could lead to significant business disruption, reputational damage, and potential financial losses. The professional challenge is to identify the root cause of the performance degradation and implement a targeted remediation that preserves security posture. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation to pinpoint the exact cause of the performance issues. This includes analyzing logs from the new security control, correlating them with network traffic patterns and application performance metrics. Goal is to understand why the control is impacting performance, not just that it is. Once the root cause is identified, e.g., inefficient rule processing, resource contention, misconfiguration, a precise adjustment or optimization of the security control can be made. This iterative process of analysis, adjustment, and revalidation ensures that security is enhanced without compromising essential business function. This aligns with best practices in IT service management and security operations, emphasizing a proactive and analytical approach to problem solving, minimizing risk, and ensuring alignment with business objectives. Incorrect approaches analysis. Reverting the security control immediately without thorough investigation is a failure to address the underlying security gap that necessitated its implementation. It represents a reactive rather than proactive security stance and potentially leaves the network exposed to threats. This approach prioritizes short-term operational convenience over long-term security resilience. Disabling specific security features of the control without understanding their impact on the overall security posture is also problematic. It can create blind spots and weaken defenses against specific attack vectors, leading to a fragmented and less effective security architecture. This approach demonstrates a lack of comprehensive understanding of the security control's functionality and its role in the broader security strategy. Implementing a blanket policy change across all network segments without granular analysis is inefficient and potentially harmful. It assumes a uniform impact of the security control, which is rarely the case. This approach can lead to unnecessary disruption in segments where the control is not causing issues and may not effectively resolve the problem in segments where it is. It lacks the precision required for effective security management and operational stability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first acknowledging the dual imperatives of security and operational continuity. A structured incident response and problem management framework is essential. This involves 1. Incident identification and logging. Clearly document the observed performance degradation and its correlation with the new security control. 2. Diagnosis and root cause analysis. Utilize monitoring tools, logs, and expert knowledge to determine the precise reason for the performance impact. 3. Solution development and testing. Design and test potential solutions in a controlled environment if possible or with a phased rollout. 4. Implementation and verification. Apply the chosen solution and rigorously verify that both security and performance are restored to acceptable levels. 5. Documentation and knowledge transfer. Record the findings, the solution, and lessons learned to prevent recurrence and inform future security deployments. Question 18. Investigation of a critical business application experiencing intermittent connectivity issues, coinciding with increased alerts from the security appliance indicating potential malicious traffic originating from specific internal IP addresses. The security team is under pressure to restore application functionality immediately. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to diagnose and resolve this situation while maintaining security integrity? Option A. Implement broad firewall rules to block all traffic from the reported source IP addresses to prevent any further potential malicious activity. Option B. Escalate the issue to the vendor of the security appliance and await their instructions on how to proceed without performing internal analysis. Option C. Analyze network traffic logs and flow data associated with the affected application and the reported source IP addresses to identify legitimate communication patterns and differentiate them from potential threats. Option D. Immediately disable all security policies associated with the affected application's traffic to restore service and investigate the alerts later. Correct answer is C. Analyze network traffic logs and flow data associated with the affected application and the reported source IP addresses to identify legitimate communication patterns and differentiate them from potential threats. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security implementation. balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of legitimate network traffic. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and categorizing traffic that might appear anomalous, but is, in fact, essential for business operations. Misclassifying critical application traffic as malicious can lead to significant business disruption, impacting productivity, revenue, and customer satisfaction. Conversely, failing to identify and block genuine threats can expose the organization to data breaches, financial loss, and reputational damage. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue without fully understanding the root cause adds to the complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation. This begins with understanding the specific application and its communication patterns. Leveraging network monitoring tools to capture and analyze traffic flows associated with the affected application is crucial. This analysis should focus on identifying the source and destination IP addresses, ports, protocols, and the typical behavior of this traffic. By comparing current traffic patterns against established baselines or known good configurations, security professionals can differentiate between legitimate application communication and potential threats. Implementing specific firewall rules or access control lists, ACL, that precisely permit the identified legitimate traffic, while denying other potentially malicious traffic, represents best professional practice. This granular control ensures that security policies are effective without being overly restrictive. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and the need for well-defined security policies that are both effective and operational. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling security controls entirely to restore service is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It represents a complete abdication of security responsibility, exposing the organization to a wide range of threats that could lead to data breaches, compliance violations, depending on industry regulations like HIPAA, PCI DSS, or GDPR. Though these are not specified for this exam's jurisdiction, the principle of due diligence applies universally, and financial penalties. This approach prioritizes immediate operational continuity over long-term security posture, which is professionally unacceptable. Implementing overly broad security rules that block all traffic from the suspected source IP addresses without a thorough investigation is also professionally unsound. While it might temporarily stop the perceived issue, it risks blocking legitimate traffic from other critical services or users that happen to share those IP addresses. This can lead to the same operational disruptions as disabling controls and demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the network environment. It fails to meet the professional standard of implementing precise and effective security measures. Relying solely on vendor support without internal validation is another failure. While vendor expertise is valuable, the organization's security team has the ultimate responsibility for understanding and managing its own network security. Blindly implementing vendor recommendations without internal verification can lead to misconfigurations or the adoption of solutions that are not tailored to the specific environment, potentially creating new vulnerabilities or operational issues. This approach neglects the professional duty to thoroughly understand and validate security implementations within one's own infrastructure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response and troubleshooting methodology. This involves 1. Identification, recognizing and documenting the issue. 2. Containment, taking immediate steps to limit the impact if possible without causing undue disruption. 3. Eradication, identifying and removing the root cause. 4. Recovery, restoring normal operations. 5. Lessons learned, analyzing the incident to improve future responses and security posture. In this scenario, the decision-making process should prioritize understanding the traffic patterns of the affected application through diligent monitoring and analysis before making any changes to security policies. This data-driven approach ensures that security measures are both effective and appropriate for the operational environment. Question 19. What factors determine the effectiveness of implementing network access control policies that integrate identity management with network segmentation to enforce the principle of least privilege within a Cisco security ecosystem? Option A. The extent to which the solution allows for broad network access to minimize user complaints about restricted resources. Option B. The thoroughness of asset discovery and classification, the granularity of access policies mapped to user roles and device types, and the robustness of integration with existing identity management systems. Option C. The number of security vendors involved in the implementation to ensure a diverse range of features. Option D. The speed at which the network access control solution is deployed across the entire organization. The correct answer is B. The thoroughness of asset discovery and classification, the granularity of access policies mapped to user roles and device types, and the robustness of integration with existing identity management systems. Explanation. The scenario involves implementing a secure network access control solution, specifically focusing on the integration of identity and access management (IAM) with network segmentation. The professional challenge lies in balancing robust security with operational usability and compliance requirements. Organizations must ensure that only authorized users and devices can access specific network resources, adhering to the principle of least privilege. This requires a thorough understanding of the organization's security policies, regulatory mandates, e.g., data privacy laws, industry-specific compliance, and the technical capabilities of the chosen security technologies. The complexity arises from the need to map user roles and device types to granular network access policies, manage dynamic changes in user status or device posture, and maintain audit trails for compliance. The correct approach emphasizes a phased implementation that begins with a comprehensive discovery and classification of network assets and user roles. This is followed by the design of granular access policies based on the principle of least privilege, leveraging the capabilities of Cisco's Identity Services Engine (IaaS) or similar solutions. The integration with existing IAM systems, like Active Directory or LDAP, is crucial for centralized user management and policy enforcement. Regular auditing and continuous monitoring of access logs are essential for detecting anomalies and ensuring ongoing compliance. This approach represents best professional practice because it is systematic, risk-aware, and directly addresses regulatory requirements for data protection and access control. It ensures that security controls are aligned with business needs and compliance obligations, minimizing the attack surface and potential for unauthorized access. An incorrect approach might involve a broad, unsegmented network access policy that grants excessive permissions to a wide range of users and devices. This fails to adhere to the principle of least privilege, significantly increasing the risk of lateral movement by attackers if an endpoint is compromised. From a regulatory perspective, this approach could violate data privacy regulations that mandate protection of sensitive information by limiting access to authorized personnel only. Another incorrect approach could be to implement network segmentation without proper user or device identity context. This would result in static access rules that are difficult to manage and do not adapt to changes in user roles or device security posture. This can lead to either overly restrictive policies that hinder legitimate operations or overly permissive policies that create security gaps. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting organizational assets and user data. A third incorrect approach might be to prioritize speed of deployment over thorough policy design and testing. This could lead to misconfigurations, unintended access grants, or operational disruptions. Such haste could result in noncompliance with security standards and potentially create vulnerabilities that are exploited before they can be identified and remediated, leading to reputational damage and potential legal repercussions. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that includes understanding the business context and security objectives, identifying relevant regulatory and compliance requirements, performing a thorough risk assessment, designing security controls based on established principles like least privilege, selecting appropriate technologies and integrating them effectively, implementing in a phased and tested manner, and establishing robust monitoring and auditing processes for continuous improvement and compliance verification. Question 20. When evaluating the implementation of network segmentation to enhance security posture and limit the blast radius of potential threats within a complex enterprise environment, which approach best balances security requirements with operational continuity? Option A. Implement a phased micro-segmentation strategy, starting with critical assets and high-risk applications, using granular policies based on application identity and communication flows, with continuous monitoring and validation. Option B. Deploy broad network segmentation based solely on IP address ranges for different departments, without analyzing specific application communication patterns or dependencies. Option C. Immediately block all intersegment traffic by default across the entire network, requiring explicit allow rules for all communication, and address operational issues as they arise. Option D. Focus exclusively on strengthening perimeter security controls and assume internal network segmentation is less critical for preventing widespread compromise. The correct answer is A. Implement a phased microsegmentation strategy, starting with critical assets and high-risk applications, using granular policies based on application identity and communication flows, with continuous monitoring and validation. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in network security implementation, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a dynamic business environment. Specifically, the challenge lies in effectively segmenting a network to limit the blast radius of a potential breach, while ensuring that legitimate business traffic can flow unimpeded. This requires a deep understanding of application dependencies, traffic patterns, and the capabilities of security devices. The professional must not only understand the technical implementation, but also the business impact of their decisions. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based implementation of microsegmentation, starting with critical assets and gradually expanding. This methodology allows for continuous monitoring, validation, and adjustment, minimizing disruption. It aligns with best practices for security architecture, emphasizing least privilege and defense in depth. From a regulatory perspective, while the 350-701 exam focuses on technical implementation rather than specific U.S. regulations, the principles of data protection and incident prevention inherent in such frameworks are implicitly supported by robust segmentation. Implementing microsegmentation in a controlled, iterative manner demonstrates due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems, which is a foundational requirement for compliance with various data privacy and security standards. An incorrect approach of broadly blocking all traffic by default without thorough analysis would be professionally unacceptable. This would likely cripple business operations, leading to significant financial losses and reputational damage. Ethically, it fails to consider the impact on users and the business's ability to function. It also represents a failure in professional judgment by not performing adequate due diligence. Another incorrect approach of implementing segmentation based solely on IP addresses without considering application layer protocols and communication patterns would be technically flawed. This would lead to either excessive blocking of legitimate traffic or insufficient security, as attackers could potentially exploit application-level vulnerabilities that bypass IP-based rules. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of modern application architectures and a failure to implement effective security controls. A third incorrect approach of relying solely on perimeter security without internal segmentation would leave the network vulnerable to lateral movement by attackers who breach the perimeter. This is a significant security gap, as it does not adhere to the principle of defense in depth and increases the risk of widespread compromise. Professionally, this represents a failure to implement a comprehensive security strategy. The professional reasoning process should involve a thorough discovery and analysis phase to understand application dependencies and traffic flows. This should be followed by a risk assessment to prioritize segmentation efforts. Implementation should be iterative, with continuous monitoring and validation. Collaboration with application owners and business stakeholders is crucial to ensure that security measures do not impede critical operations.